share and questions answered online so that folks who can't join us during this hour can still watch it later. So that's what the recording's about. Um, okay, so let's do a little bit just kind of where we're at. I think if you were in board boot camp or were with us before, you know that sorry, let me make this smaller so I can see my screen, everyone. Thanks. So you know that these are the key 6 responsibilities that we highlight as the role of the board. And today we're talking all about financial oversight. Last month we talked about mission, vision, and goals, which play a role in financial oversight. And then you'll see the next 4 sessions will be on those other the remainder of the important board responsibilities. So ultimately, financial oversight is your budget is basically the manifestation of your values and priorities as a district led by the board. So you're legally responsible for approving the budget for your district through resolution. And it shows up in a format called the one I-95 or the I-95. I'm sorry. So I'll show you all kind of what that looks like a little bit later. But let's take a step back and look across the board where funding comes from and introduce you to a few keywords. So the first is that as of 2019, and it modifies a little bit, and I want to name that every district is different, but ultimately the majority of your funding is that purple piece of the pie chart, and that is at the state level, that's state funding. The blue is going to be your local funding, so that is local taxes, levies, bonds if you've passed them. And then the green is the federal funding. And I'm going to outline what that looks like on the next slide. But a key word that is really useful is the FTE. This is going to be that full-time equivalent. And this is based on student enrollment. And as we all know, this is variable every year and modifies, changes throughout the year as well. But ultimately, you have a projection of your enrollment, and that's the basis of the state funding that you think you'll get, right? And that's a key part of the revenue of your budget. And it is what the state uses to determine what your district is going to receive in the state funding category. It's also just helpful to know that that all of these funding streams really matter. And even though federal looks small, when we lose part of our federal funding, right, or when it's you're not sure if you're getting it, right, if you're not sure about a levy or not, all those things really impact the budgeting process, right, because it becomes a key portion of what you've anticipated being able to spend in order to educate students in your district. So let's talk, and then ultimately, a lot of keywords emerge, a lot of details about financial oversight and knowledge are really useful. So what we are going to share is our finance glossary, Finance 100 glossary. And this is in the chat now. And usually we give this as a part of our financial trainings, but we thought we just want to share it now with y'all so that you have access to it. So we're going to move along, but know that that is a resource for you to kind of demystify a process that can feel pretty complicated. And it is really complicated. There are people in your district office who are in charge of knowing these things. We're going to talk entirely about the oversight piece, right, at the governance and board level. So let's talk a bit about the federal funds. Here we see state funding, local funding, and federal funding. The prototypical model is what uses FTE to determine how much you get at the district level, in addition to some other special programs. All of those are gone into in depth at the training. We're not going to talk about them here. We know that property tax, levies, and bonds are at that local level, and then we get grants, and we get through different Title I, Title II, Title IV, IDA. These are different federal programs that are variable depending upon your makeup of your district and the groups of students you serve in your district. You are then qualify for certain federal funds or not. Largely, this flows through OSPI, and then OSPI allocates. So that federal, local, state, all of them are really, really important in creating what the revenue stream for your district. Any questions at that point before I move us along? You probably already know that, but in case you don't, it's a really important background. All right. So let's talk about what actual oversight looks like. And so here's a way that we talk about this. We start with these sources of revenue. State, local, federal, and other. Other's going to be, again, we talk about it in other trainings. I'm going to move us along from there. Your role there is advocacy. You are advocating, and Logan's in the room, and he would back me up on this. Advocacy is a year-round process, so it never really ends, right? And it's always evolving. Often in the board role, you're advocating for more revenue, right? More support, more money to support your students. That ends up being a big role that you play as an elected member and representative of your community for public education. It's an important role. Um, and Daniel has something to say. Do you want to say it or do you want to just write it?
So I put it in the chat. It's going back to the previous slide. Sorry, sometimes a little bit of a slow typer. Um,
That's
so
okay.
so things like state funding is pretty much automatic. You have students show up, they generate funding, everyone's happy. Federal funding, you have to reapply for every year through the grants. You know, your district may get an allocation, but you have to apply for it every year to be able to access the funds.
Nice. Thanks, Daniel. And that's labor intensive. Uh, thank you. Appreciate it. Um, so we move from kind of, okay, we have the money coming in. We're advocating to get as much as we can for on behalf of our students. And our district. And then we go into the budget development process. So you can see here that there's a balance between the expenditures, right? Like what we're going to spend, and then the revenue that's coming in. And we're making sure that we're making budgeting decisions that enable that to be balanced. And ultimately, the board is playing a guidance role. Now, the strategic plan plays a key role here, as I mentioned before. You're bringing to life the vision, mission, and goals through ensuring resource allocation is going to those goals that your community and district and board have determined are necessary for your district or are important for your district. What we so it's really key, right? Sometimes this looks like budget priorities, right? Which some of you mentioned. Sometimes it's board guidance, board guidelines. It's named differently across districts, but this is a normal practice that most boards engage in around this time, which a lot of you are engaged in now. So that's great. And then the next is going to be the actual district budget. Your district staff does this. They take into account the guidelines or priorities from the board, and they look at the expenditures, revenue, look ahead at anticipated enrollment, look at other external factors that are playing a role, of which there are many, and offer a budget. And from there, you adopt the budget, right? And then monitor it throughout the year through asking questions, through checking in, right? In some cases, like Michael noted in Moses Lake, when there's been a concern, there's much more intervention, right, to make sure things are happening. And what we do is adjust it every year, right? So through the monitoring process, we see how things went, and then we go through the process every year to determine what's coming in this year, what will that look like, what are our priorities, and how can we anticipate any other external pressures. So a lot of you are in this process, but it's helpful to know that it's always sort of happening. Thanks, Daniel, for sharing. Yeah, so that resource, the financial health report, was offered in our newsletter on May 1st, and then another resource we're going to go over soon was also offered in that newsletter. So thanks for sharing it, Daniel, and checking it out in the newsletter. So from this, what we're going to do is move on to what it actually looks like, the F195, so that you can see what the budget summary is. Note that this is consistent across the state. Okay, every board ultimately files for this before August 1. That is by law. So it's helpful to know some of the different funds that move into it. We are going to talk entirely about the general fund. That's where 80% of the expenses and revenues are. And so that's where we're going to prioritize talking, but note that these other ones exist as well. So I'll just kind of name what they are. That general fund is going to be all the district functions, regular practice, regular work that needs to happen, and paying for staff, et cetera. materials, all that. And then the ASB is going to be the student body activities. So any, student leadership, sometimes PTO funds are through there. And then we get the debt service fund. So this is going to be principal and interest on long-term bonds. Okay, it has its own budget area because you don't want it to, you don't want this kind of influx or not routinized amounts of money influencing your budgeting process, if that makes sense. So the general fund is separate from these other ones that are more variable. Capital project funds is going to be building buildings, huge modifications of buildings, things like that. Levies and bonds are here. And then the transportation vehicle fund is buying new, revising, modifying your school buses, basically. So each of these has their own fund balance, their own kind of expenses and revenue report. We're going to talk entirely about the general fund now. Make sense? Now I'm going to just introduce us to the revenue. So that's going to be the green box, all the money coming through. So we saw where that can come from, right? From the state, from the federal, and from the local. All of that together is here. Now it's useful to note in our deciphering district budgets training that every single line item that's coming in or going out or an expense comes with its own code. And the code list is offered in that deciphering district budget training. We're not going to offer it now just because it's a little bit overwhelming without more time. But note that every single dollar is allocated and has a special code that tells you where it came from, and then a different coding scheme to show where it's going.
Heather,
Purple,
I think Daniel had his hand raised and was
Yep.
might want to add something.
please, Daniel. Thanks. I can't see your hand. Awesome.
Oh,
Go for
sorry.
it.
So it goes back to the timing. So July 10th, by law, all districts have to publish a budget, at least on their website, and have a copy in their district office by July 10th. Um, Class 2 districts, so that's anyone under 2,000 FTE, they must adopt theirs by August 31st. Sorry, by August 1st. In the Class 1 districts, those over 2,000, they have to adopt by August 31st. So those are the three big time frames that you have to deal with. Those are the deadlines that you need to meet.
Thanks, Daniel. That's really, really helpful. And it's helpful to know that it changes, right, depending upon the size of the district. Let's move to purple. This is going to be the expenses, total appropriations, expenditures, other financing uses. Each of these means something different. We're just going to take it all together and add it together as being our overall expenses, knowing that in the overall training, we go in more depth. Blue is going to be excess revenue, other financing sources, over under expenditures, and other financing uses. This is fancy OSPI language for just saying the difference between what you spent and what you brought in. Okay, so we're just subtracting. Oh, it looks like I'm raising my hand, but I'm talking, so that is not what I'm doing. I'm going to lower my hand. And then we have ultimately that peach box, we're bringing our fund balance over from last year, right? So whatever it is that we had left from our fund balance year over year, we bring that over in that summary. And then we ultimately add these together to get our overall fund balance for this year. So I'm going to just take us through the math. Let's do it. So we got 29,276,550 in this pretty large district. That's the fund balance that they're bringing over from the year prior. So we start there. Then we look at, okay, this is what we need to figure out. We need to figure out what we have left from this year and ultimately what we're adding to last year to get our overall fund balance for this year. Okay, so we start with 330 million as our revenue. That's what we're bringing in at this hypothetical district. Okay, we spent 324 million is our general expenditures, and then these other two categories, which are distinct, lead us to 324 million 65,000. Okay, 703. So that's going to be our total expenses. All we do is subtract these. Sometimes, friends, this is a negative number. This district happens to have a positive number, right? So we have 6 million left over. We brought in 6 million more than we spent. Okay, that's all that's determining. If we have a tough year, if we have a huge expense, if something big is happening, then that's going to be a negative number, which is not what we want ultimately. But year over year, you start to see a story being told of the district, and you can sometimes explain why, right? There's lower numbers or higher numbers. In this case, we have the positive, and we add these together to get our overall fund balance for this year. So we bring forward from last year, look at what we have this year, and that's what our number is. We're going to stop there in terms of math. But note that our deciphering district budget training goes in quite depth around where all these numbers come from and then what you do with them as well. But it's useful to know what we mean by fund balance and how it's determined on that summary form. I'm going to stop there to make sure I'm not missing any chats or comments from anyone. We okay?
You're good.
Real
Thanks,
quick,
Ratsumi.
Heather,
TJ,
and
please.
Daniel might be able to help me out here, but I think as any board member, but especially as a new board member, when you look at that general fund balance number, it's an important question to ask is how much of that is restricted?
Right.
And I don't want to get too far down into GASB fund balance definitions in the interest of time and other reasons.
Yeah.
But essentially, a restricted fund balance is much less flexible than other fund balances. And what we're seeing now with a lot of districts, they have a total positive fund balance, so they're avoiding state oversight, but they're doing so in a way where they have a positive restricted fund balance and a negative unrestricted fund balance. And that is a very precarious situation in which a district has to operate. So, Daniel, if you want to give any quick examples or clean me up on any of that, feel free to jump in.
I mean, restricted funds, it's money that you get for a specific thing that you can't spend anywhere else. For example, special ed, you can only spend on special ed students. Um, and if you have a positive there, it means that, you didn't spend enough. If you have positive restricted there, it means you didn't spend as much in those programs. So you're carrying that over into the next year. But it can drive, if it can drive the so-called unrestricted, the free money into the negative. Um, and that's the one that's when you really have to start looking at, okay, what's our total fund balance doing?
Mhm. Okay. I will say that this is the difference between restricted and unrestricted is unpacked in our Tackling Financial Soundness training, which talks all about the health indicators model from OSPI. And so, TJ, if that's helpful to know where that comes up and kind of how we use it and where it's taught, but that feels really key as a question to pose for yourself and of your district. Great. Okay, so in general, we want to have more revenue than expenditures. That is not a surprise, but that is an important thing to note. You want to make sure that you are not in the negative year over year. If your expenditures, so this is going to be the purple boxes, right, exceed your revenue, the green box, then your blue box will be negative, and this means you're spending it more than you're taking in. So this is where we get to the financial health indicators, depending on a number of things. So we have cash flow, we have the amount you're under, your total fund balance, restricted, not restricted, and other factors. These can be a concerning sign and sort of a red flag that some difficult choices will need to be made. Certainly looking at the following budget for that next year. So red flags, right, are a good way to think about this. And another is your fund balance. So people disagree on, not disagree a lot, but it depends on the size of your district, what percentage of your overall budget you want to have in fund balance. It's generally recommended that 8 to 10% is going to be enough to make sure that if there's any huge emergency, right, then your district can handle it. Those small districts that have just way less overall budget, they might need a higher percentage in their fund balance in order to accommodate large expenses like a new boiler or something else big that is unanticipated, but that you need the financial resources to support in the moment. So that's really what that unrestricted fund balance is. And so you want to make sure that you have the right percentage. If you start to get really high in terms of fund balance, there's some questions there of whether you should be spending more on your strategic plan or other goals, right, that are student facing, that are supportive of the learning in your schools and communities. There's not a lot of districts that are in that place in this moment because money is really financial hardship is just across the state happening to everyone.
Yeah.
Daniel?
And so this also goes into the question in chat about percentage fund balance to aim for. It's really based on district need. You know, part of it is due to timing of state funds. The state pays you nearly a quarter of your state funds in the last 2 months of the year, when you've only got 16% of your expenditures. So you need fund balance to offset that. But local levy dollars can help. But it's really up to local district need. Um, and anticipated needs. If you want to start saving up, let's say your district thinks, okay, we will need to replace, our boiler. We will need to replace, all our curriculum in a couple of years. Then you can start saving up for that. But it's really based on need. And also what your unions are willing to negotiate you having. Because fund balance, think of it as the balance in your checking account. You want to have money left over at the end of every month. Um, so how much of that is really it's how much money do you think you might need for certain upcoming unexpected expenses?
Mhm. It's hard to anticipate. And there's a question there about the 5%, and the being under 5% is concerning. Do either TJ or Daniel want to speak to that question in particular?
So 1 month of expenditures, simple calculation is 8.33%. So if you were to suddenly lose all funding sources, for a month, do you have enough to make, to pay everything for 1 month? That's 8.33. Um, but it, lots of factors go into it. But once you start getting under 5%, you just start having less and less of that cushion available. The more you start eating into it, and if you have a sudden increase in expenditures, will you be able to meet that sudden increase in expenditures? So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's a general guideline, that is used. Uh, just when they look at the financial health, what's a good fund balance? And yeah, anything under 5%, you start getting into the possibility of not having that cushion for unexpected expenditures.
And Carson contributed a note for North Shore, I see, um, that you were working to kind of negatively impact students less by going under your 5% fund balance in order to make the cuts more slowly instead of suddenly. Does that sound right, Carson?
Yeah, they did it about over 3 or 4 years of cuts, and now they're starting to slowly build back.
Right. And yeah, you're a large district, right? So that there's a little bit more cushion there because the overall amount is so much higher. Yeah.
Could I just ask a question here too?
Please.
So we just came through our 2 year audit where they dug through everything and OSPI, and one of their suggestions is that we really ought to have 60 days worth of cash on hand,
Mhm.
which would be considerably higher than 10%, and we do. I mean, we're back to where we were almost 2 years ago. Our teachers union doesn't like that because they want some of that money. But I mean, if you start whittling away at this thing and then you have an issue, like somebody just mentioned a moment ago, and you start having to let people go, that creates a problem. And so they were talking to us a couple of months ago that the union was about, all you really need is 5 or 6%. Why do you have this 15% requirement for this district? But I don't know. I don't ever want us to be in a position again where we don't know how we're going to make payroll at the end of the month. And granted, there were some big factors that contributed to that should never come up again. But still, I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's really based on, individual, like we said, individual circumstances, individual district circumstances, you know, and those needs. Fund balance can pay for, if you budget XYZ students, so you hire based on that, and then all of a sudden the students don't show up. well, you're going to get less money from the state, but your teachers are still under contract, so you're still going to have to pay them. So hey, there's use for fund balance. Um, and sometimes the public perception is a really high fund balance is, oh, you're not spending the money on the kids. Why don't you spend it on the kids? And again, it gets back to the example of, savings account. Can you spend can you pay your monthly rent or monthly mortgage out of a savings account? Yes, you can for a while, but you need to be able to start replenishing that. So it's you want to make sure you've got money on hand to meet those unexpected needs, and rises and falls in state and local funding, since it's not flat throughout the year. And just sometimes you just need those funds for, you know, you know, you know, so something just happened and we need, $100,000 to replace, an HVAC unit, in Seattle, that's a rounding error. In McCleary, where I worked for a while, that's a big chunk of money. So it's really dependent on, on district needs and, uh, you know, the 60 days is a GFOA general guideline, so it's not specific for school districts, but it's what the auditor's office uses. And it's a general, I think it's also a general one that OSPI has used in the past. It's part of the financial health indicators.
Yeah. TJ, it
Yeah,
looks like you were going to say.
Yeah, real quick. Yes to everything Daniel said. And part of the reason why the agency has tried to put a statewide fund balance bill out there twice and has failed is because of these types of issues. It's really complex. It depends on district size. If your district has a 3% fund balance, it's not healthy, but it's not, why are you there? Do you have a plan? So a lot of it is about it's just one factor of a litmus check. So if you're at 3% year over year, that's probably not the best place to be. And there are justifiable reasons why you're going to have to spend down your fund balance. I think the key is to get back to something Daniel just said is, are you utilizing your fund balance to pay for ongoing expenditures? That's the red flag, because then you're getting into situation and areas where your ongoing costs are exceeding your revenue. But if a boiler breaks or if you need to replace something unexpectedly, then that's exactly why we support and encourage 8 to 10% fund balance. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
There's also a law this year that did not pass where they wanted to cap the fund balance. So you couldn't have had 60 days because they would have said if that law had passed, you couldn't have had that high a percentage.
Right.
Yes, that was also us. The same bill had a min and a max. So we were trying to create this range that districts could retain funds in year over year.
Yep. And and one thing to say is that if your district does spend more money in a year than it brought in, and so you dip into your fund balance, that in and of itself is not necessarily a huge red flag. It's when it happens at a large dollar amount, a large percentage of your fund balance, for year over year over year. That's when it really, that's when you really need to pay attention. But if you overspent, if you spent $1,000 more than you brought in, you know, slap on the wrist, bad, don't do that again. You're spending more than you're bringing in. If you spend 10% of your, fund, if you overspend by 10% of your revenues, then you're really talking about, needing to take a look at your situation.
Okay. Great questions. Keep them coming if more emerge. I want to just highlight a few resources. So the first is there is an article that talks all about kind of financial hardship and school districts' financial trouble. It talks about what binding conditions means and what that process is. And we've talked a few examples of some districts who have been close to that and gotten out or were in that and got out. And so it just gives a lay of the land of what that is. It was written by Daniel, actually. So that's a resource that can be helpful. The other resource I want to highlight is this financial health checklist. So the first is the financial health indicators model that was sent to you in the newsletter. and is a few years old, and that's really important. A lot of districts do that, and we have a training that talks you through how to what each of those are, and then how to kind of figure them out for your district and what and how you can use them. The next one is a little more new. It's called the Financial Health Checklist, and it's using that superpower of boards, which is asking a question. I feel like it's one of those important governance things you can do. And it sets you up with a few different questions. Thanks, Ratsumi, for putting that in the chat. And it just offers a series of questions you can ask. And TJ can speak more about this, but if you are saying yes to 3 or more of these, that might be concerning. One on their own, we're getting into kind of this is what our district needs. We have a plan. There's a reason, right? There's local reasons why we make sense of our budget in a way that supports our district. But when we start to do 2 or 3 of them, we start to maybe get into financial hardship. And so this is a set of questions that the board can use on the front end to help you guide your governance, right? And support you to ask good questions. And for the district to be held accountable for some of these practices that we might rely on to hit our budget, but that might not be sustainable long term. So that is another resource we recommend using. Those are embedded in our financial trainings as well, so that you can use them a little bit more in action. Any questions on that before I move forward? And just any questions in general from the topics we've explored so far?
Can I
yeah.
ask a question? Sorry, I was looking for raising my hand.
Go ahead, Becky.
These trainings, it's really hard to find them available. I mean, is there a plan to make them like, accessible online so you don't have to, it would be nice to have these things scheduled, or created so that you could just go in and watch them and take them on your own time, and rather than having to wait for it to show up as a presentation on the WSSDA calendar and try and coordinate it so that you can get to one of those.
Peggy, that's a great question. So we're actually just are developing our LMS, learning management system, so that we can start to offer more asynchronous learning opportunities. So the next stop, I'm going to do a state funding one, a local funding one, and a federal funding one. And the goal is to make all those asynchronous and to have a part of this deciphering district budgets one also available asynchronous. So those are our long-term goals. Right now, they've been built as in-person trainings with like worksheets and kind of all together in person. So that's the materials we have available now, but I'm a year and a half into this role, and so we have long-term plans of trying to make things more readily available. As you know, Peggy, it does seem like a need of the state that we're working on addressing. Right now, Board Boot Camp is the only asynchronous training that WSSDA offers, but to be continued with more. Thank you for the input. It's really important. In the meantime, it's being offered in August, deciphering district budgets in Lacey, where our headquarters are, and then tackling financial soundness and deciphering district budgets will be offered in Spokane in November. So those are the in-person options. And then in February, they are offered virtually every year as well. So those are our 3 main training calendar touch points. And then we're adding a spring one somewhere else across the state. So it's going to be 4 times where you can get these trainings with the goal of having asynchronous options within the year or sooner. We're doing our best. Great point, Peggy. Daniel, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we've just really started the process of working with a new company for our learning management system. So we're learning about how the system works and all that, how to build the course content. So it's going to be a couple more months at least before, we get it up and running. So, um, don't expect it by May 1st, not going to happen. But later this year, and I'm sure we will be announcing it here, there, and everywhere when it's up and running.
Yeah, thank you.
So please be patient.
Yeah, the input is really, really valuable. The board boot camp is the same. That's right. So there's one kind of 5-hour board boot camp offering that talks about roles and responsibilities across the board. And then there's 2 sets of trainings. One is equity and one is finance. And we've been talking entirely today about the finance trainings. I mentioned at least three of them. Vision aligned budgeting is all about those board guidelines, deciphering district budget. I just gave you a snippet of, and it's talking all about the codes and kind of where the revenue and expenditures are going and coming and how to name those. And then tackling financial soundness is all about the financial health indicators model, which we've also mentioned. So more soon. Great questions, everyone, and really important feedback. We appreciate it. With that in mind, here, oh, I should have just moved forward. These are all the trainings that I just named. And it's that first bullet, you see the state, local, and federal funding. Those are the first ones that we're going to work to have asynchronous options for. So you can learn more about those funding streams affecting your district. Note that this work is really grounded in the Washington State School Board standards, creating the conditions district-wide for student and staff success, making sure things are moving smoothly, the buildings are good, everything's hit, just that the resources are there that are needed in order to make your district run. That's one of the most important things you do. So thank you for being here. Thank you for learning about this key responsibility. It really matters, and we'll try and get as much info out to you as we can. So we're at the closing mark. We did a great job. Any questions before we move on to next topics and other events to join?
I want to make one comment. As you're looking at, all the budget stuff and everything, finance people speak their own language. But, you know, uh, I can say this from my experience, just about every business manager and business officer and finance person, budget officer out there, if you have a question, they will do their best to answer it, and hopefully translate it from, you know, GASB, GASB, OSPI accounting manual speak to plain English. So, so don't hesitate to ask the questions. They will do their best to answer them and help you understand and be a more effective school board member.
And note that normal roles and responsibilities fall here too. So you're moving with your superintendent to kind of ask questions, seek information. No questions dumb here, right? It's really good to kind of learn. But we want to keep in mind that it's at the governance level and not at the operations level, right? And it's important to keep that in mind, that there are luckily experts, hopefully, in your district who know all about the budget. It's really complex. So, but asking those oversight governance questions it can be really important. Renee asked a question, do you have suggestions about how to have insight into the fiscal conversations that are part of the bargaining process? Daniel or TJ, do you want to field that question? Do you have any thoughts about oversight as it relates to bargaining? And I would note, oh, sorry, Daniel, 1 second, Ratsmi, would you mind putting in there's a bargaining manual publication from WSSDA. If you could throw that in the chat, that'd be really helpful while Daniel answers.
So the bargaining process, let's boil it down to, your union's one higher pay, and it's a question of what your district can afford. So your district office, the finance and budget side are going to be looking at, okay, they want XYZ dollars. Well, what does that mean going forward? And sometimes it can be really easy to manage, like, okay, hey, we understand districts in trouble, we're just willing to go with state inflation every year. Great, wonderful. They start saying, well, we want 3% this year, then an extra 5% the next year, and so on and so on. Then it's really, okay, how much is that going to cost? What does that look like for the district? And at some point, okay, would we have to cut staff to meet that, those higher pay rates? So it's like, you get a truck, you get a truck, you get a truck, and we're going to take yours away and give you a scooter. So, it, it's, yeah, it really depends on what the union is asking for, and what you've maybe given them in the past. And compare that to, are you how overstaffed are you? Because, whether the staff is state funded or local funded or federal funded, they'll all get the same increase. And so it's a question of, okay, how much is this really going to cost us? How much can we afford?
Thank you, Daniel. And I want to note two things. One is that we do have a bargaining manual that supports a budgeting and bargaining manual that can be helpful here. So you just sort of look at that publication and get a sense of the background and what's recommended. And then Carson, I see you. I mean, I would make use of the exempt OPMA allows closed meetings to talk about some of these things so that you are in a good position to make recommendations so that the board can work in line with the district in the bargaining process to figure that out. And so that you, when you're able to vote, you are aware of what's going on and can vote to support the contract. So yeah, OPMA allows for that. So really make use of that so that you can learn the background, the content, and how to weigh in. Thanks, Carson. And thank you, Ratsumi, and wonderful question. We can also answer more detailed questions about particular boards not online. And any other questions surface for folks before we close out? I'll go ahead, seeing none, move us along. Ratsumi, do you want to go ahead and chat about this opportunity?
Yes. So there'll be a link in the chat where you can sign up for if you want to get the newsletter directly to your inbox, but also that same web page has all of the previous gathering recordings, previous emails that were sent out, so everyone is able to revisit and look at all that content. So the next one that's coming out is May, and that'll be in a couple weeks. So if you're signed up for the newsletter, you'll get that directly to your inbox. And also looking forward to May is our monthly gathering topic on community engagement and advocacy with our very own Logan. That's here in the call. So then we'll be looking forward to that next month as well. Same time, same link, same channel. So feel again, use that sign up registration confirmation and add that to your calendar to make it easier for you to just join that link as well.
And I believe
Go ahead.
we're also going to be joined by Lakeisha,
Yes.
who is the leadership consultant and was formerly the Ledge Rep chair and is a current board member in Federal Way. So she'll be there with Logan as well.
Yes, look forward to having you all there as well. And looking forward to today kicks off our regional meetings. And so feel free to look on the director area map, which one is yours, and feel free to join and sign up for this great event. It comes with dinner, it comes with a great conversation, and hope to see you all soon or across the state. Thanks for
Yeah,
the chat there.
tonight.
And there's one tonight in Evergreen. So hope to see most of y'all there or any upcoming ones.
Down at the bottom corner in Director Area 6.
And there were some questions about our upcoming trainings and listing that. So this is a upcoming calendar for our summer in-person academy, Friday, August 21st and Saturday, the 22nd. Registration isn't ready quite yet, but we are still getting that confirming details and getting the sign up link. So feel free to make sure you keep an eye on our calendar, which will have the direct links to sign up. And again, one of the offerings is deciphering the district budget and then advancing inclusion through belonging, and then serving as board chair and discovering educational disparities. So keep a lookout for a webpage and sign up link soon. I don't think we have time for reflection unless we wanted to open it up, Heather, up to you. Otherwise, we're going to close it out. Again, if there's any more questions, feel free to put in the chat or reach out directly to us at ld at wasa.org. But is there any major questions that you have time for us now? Thank you, Chad, for being here. Appreciate all your questions. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
we appreciate everyone's time. And we really appreciate TJ for being here answering questions, Daniel for being here and answering questions, and Carson and Renee and Chad and Michael and others who just sort of contributed what's going on with your district. I know I learn a lot from what y'all share, and I know you're learning from one another, which is a key goal of the network. So thank you so much for contributing. And we look forward to see you. Thanks, Rose. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. We'll stick around in case there's any questions, okay? And TJ, if you would stick around for a second, that would be